My name is Audrey Mascarenhas, and I am President and CEO of Questor Technology. Today, I would like to talk about the attainable path to net zero and the role that Questor plays in helping us reach that. Methane is 86 times worse than CO2 from a global warming potential over a 20-year period. Methane is considered one of those short-life pollutants. In other words, it finally degrades over that 20-year period to CO2. In the interim, as it breaks down, it not only forms toxic compounds, but has a very, very big impact on warming. So by cleanly combusting it and turning it to CO2, we actually can have a very significant impact on stopping the temperature rise. And even though that sounds counterintuitive, it truly is one of our low-hanging fruit opportunities. Let me give you an example. Currently, according to the World Bank, every day we flare and vent about 14.5 billion standard cubic feet a day of gas. A lot of this gas is comprised of methane, and so this operation releases a significant amount of methane into the atmosphere. By cleanly combusting it, it would cost around $3.6 billion, and we would reduce greenhouse gas emissions 1 gigaton of CO2 equivalent a year. Over a 10-year project life, we will make this emission reduction at a cost of less than 50 cents a ton of CO2. So the conclusion from that is that it is truly one of the easiest things we can do to impact emissions. And MIT in this interactive helps demonstrate this fact. What you see on the right-hand corner of this graph is the prediction of the temperature rise. When MIT looked at the energy supply, so whether we got our energy from coal or fossil fuel, in actual reality, none of those make a big impact. When they looked at whether we, in transportation, drive electric cars or are more energy efficient, what it showed was electrification of our transportation, our buildings, etc., actually don't make an impact on that temperature rise. What has a bigger impact is actually being more energy efficient. In other words, every barrel of oil we currently use, we're only using 40% of the energy. We actually waste 60%. By doubling that efficiency to 80, we would automatically reduce our emissions in half, but we would also reduce the demand or the amount of oil and gas or energy that we need. So the conclusion that MIT reaches from this interactive is that our two biggest opportunities to have an impact on the warming is to not put methane into the atmosphere and improve our energy efficiency. And we can initiate the investment in both of those through carbon pricing. The sources of methane emissions into the atmosphere are numerous. In oil and gas specifically, it comes from the time that we drill the well at the well site, our processing of that gas, our processing of oil, all the way to the delivery of that molecule to the consumer. We have leaks, we have vapors off tanks, but our processes also release methane. One of the biggest sources of methane emissions that we perhaps haven't accounted for completely is the emissions that arise out of our maintenance activities. Whether it's maintaining our pipelines, we tend to vent a significant volume there, or when we do maintenance on engines and compressors. As you can see, there are numerous sources, and so if we're truly going to reach the golden target that we've set for ourselves of reducing our methane emissions by 70% by 2050, we have to find solutions for all of these emission sources. Now, Questor has spent 25 years focused on solutions to eliminate the emissions of methane into the atmosphere. And I'm pleased to say that we have a very, very strong track record with proven performance. And you can see from the test results on this slide, we have the ability to guarantee that any waste stream that comes to us is destroyed at 99.99% efficiency. These results were the basis for us obtaining ISO 14034 certification. This ISO standard is a new standard specific for environmental technology, and we are the first company in the world to receive this for combustion efficiency. In addition, the Solar Impulse Foundation, whose mandate was to find the top 1,000 solutions that could have an impact sustainably right now, they've also chosen our technology as a clear path to tackling the issues of climate change. So what does Questor do? In this picture, you see one of our units, and we're supporting a client in College Station, Texas, to do their maintenance operations on the gas distribution system to the homes surrounding this site. This unit is currently cleanly combusting 5 million standard cubic feet a day of methane. This volume would typically in the past have been vented. And the graph that I'd like to discuss with you, which is on the left-hand side, as you can see from that graph, if they had continued to vent the gas that was in the pipeline, they would release 8,200 tons of CO2 equivalent a day. By cleanly combusting it with Questor's technology, we're able to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 97% to a total of 260 tons of CO2 equivalent a day. As you can see from that, it's a very significant reduction, but more importantly, that reduction was achieved at a cost of less than 10 cents a ton of CO2 equivalent. Now, in this analysis, I've assumed the 20-year global warming potential of methane at 86 times worse than CO2. If I look at the 100-year period, those numbers are still significant. It's a 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions at a cost of less than 50 cents a ton of CO2 equivalent. This slide shows that if we take a big picture systematic approach, we can actually design sites to be zero flaring and venting. And what you see in this picture, and it's a large compressor station in New York State, they chose to use one of our larger units and tie everything into our unit. So we're handling the non-routine upsets or emergencies and maintenance. So maintenance on pipelines and engines. But in addition, we're making sure that we can cleanly combust and handle their routine day-to-day emissions that come from their process streams, whether that's dehydration towers, amine tanks, all of the low pressure. In addition, with there, if an engine goes down and they need to start it up again, they have the ability to do a soft start. The gathering system that flows to this facility is also maintained and pigged into this facility with the emissions handled by the Questor Clean Combustion Unit. So what you can see from that is the possibility with a single unit to create a great zero methane emission site. This picture is in Colorado, and it's at a 44-well pad site. They're currently fracking, so they've finished drilling, they're completing the wells, and the unit that's circled in yellow is one of our rental units. They're doing all of the flow back through that unit, we're picking up the vapors off the tanks. And once again, we've created a zero flaring venting site that has zero methane emissions, but zero VOCs and zero harmful pollutants. When this site is ready to move into the production phase, the units that are outlined in blue are there to make sure that when the gas is backed out of the pipeline, that instead of shutting the pad site down, we continue to cleanly combust the gas and make sure there's no harmful emissions into the atmosphere. This has not only helped them reduce the lease size by 30%, but we've reduced capital costs by about 25% on this pad site. And with the recognition of the Colorado regulator of our high performance efficiency, it allowed the owners of this site to increase their oil production 400 barrels a day. So what it really indicates is a very, very strong business case. This will give you a sense of different projects that we've worked on around the world. And what you'll see here is not only our units in Indonesia and Egypt at large gas processing facilities, but we've also supported Europe in drilling and completions. We've supported many facilities in Canada in rail car loading. And there you'll see a unit not only picking up the low pressure vapors off the rail cars, but this same unit has the ability to pick up the low pressure vapors off the tanks and the low pressure vapors coming off the truck as it unloads or loads. We've created a much safer site than if we chose to flare or vent. Now, the next area that I want to talk about, of course, is building on the MIT infographic, which talks about energy efficiency. What you're seeing in this picture is us not only cleanly combusting the waste gas that was being vented at this site, but we're taking a slipstream and using our organic Rankine cycle technology, creating clean power from that waste heat. The advantage of harnessing this heat and generating power means we've eliminated, in this case, diesel power generation, which is expensive and dirty. But we're doing something useful from a gas that would have otherwise been wasted. And in addition, we've improved air quality around this site, as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The benefit of converting waste heat to power is it's zero emissions. It can run 24/7. It's not dependent on the wind or the sun. We don't need any rare earth minerals. We have a fairly small footprint. And the best part is our battery is simply a hot water tank. There is enormous opportunity globally to generate clean electricity to meet some of our sustainability goals in a very cost-effective way. The other opportunity to create value from this heat generated from getting rid of waste gas is to use it to treat water and eliminate trucking and underground disposal so that it stays in the ecosystem. I wanted to share on this next slide the business case. So this is a battery site with a flare that's around 300 MCF a day. I'm going to assume for the discussion that the flare is 95% efficient. By cleanly combusting it with Questor's clean combustion technology, we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions 2,200 tons a year. In addition, that heat that we generate can generate 200 kilowatts of power and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions a further 1,000 tons of CO2 equivalent a year. Assuming the value of the power is 8 cents a kilowatt hour, that generates a revenue of around $140,000 a year. So if we assume a 10-year project life, we've spent about $1 million of capital It generates 1.4 million of revenue. We reduced greenhouse gas emissions 32,000 tons over that 10-year period at $0 to negative $13 a ton from a cost perspective. Additionally, most of us have a price of carbon on our balance sheets. So these offsets with an internal price on carbon could have a value of around $50 a ton in terms of offsetting that liability on a balance sheet, which would be another $1.6 million. In other words, that $1 million capital investment has generated a return of over 100%. To help quantify emission reduction, Questor has been developing a continuous emissions monitoring system that allows us to take this proactive approach because we understand the equipment on sites. We can quantify the different sources of emissions, solve them with technology, and at the end of the day, guarantee that not only is that site zero emissions, but the production of the molecules that are sold from that site are the lowest carbon molecules. To that end, we have developed a system that allows us to take these emission reductions and convert them on the blockchain platform to a carbon NFT. We will be the first company globally to have done that, and we believe that this will become a much more transparent, credible way of trading carbon globally. So to summarize, the opportunity to net zero that is sustainable and cost effective and makes business sense is first make sure that methane doesn't get put into the atmosphere. So cleanly combust it and turn it into CO2. We can then generate clean power with zero emissions from the waste heat. And because we're in an enclosed system and we have high efficiency, the CO2 and the nitrogen and water coming off the top of our stack can easily be separated with membrane technology and leave a great opportunity to sequester that CO2 or do something more useful with it. So as you can see, the opportunity to get to net zero can actually be quite cost effective. And the first two technology deployments, so don't put methane into the atmosphere and generate power from waste heat, get you 97% of the way there in a very, very cost-effective way. With the next slide, I'd like to make a comparison between carbon capture versus methane abatement as the option to net zero. In Canada, we've done 2 carbon capture projects, Boundary Dam and Quest, for roughly $3 billion, with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions 2 million tons a year. The sites that I just talked about in Mexico, there was 13 oil battery sites, venting about 8.5 million standard cubic feet a day of, 3 million standard cubic feet a day of methane equivalent. And so for cost of $8.5 million, we were able to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions 450,000 tons a year, in addition to generating 200 kilowatts of power at 3 sites. In other words, to achieve 2 million tons a year of CO2 equivalent reduction, it would cost around $40 million by going the methane abatement road, where by going the carbon capture road, it would need an investment of about $3 billion. So from this example, it is quite clear that methane abatement is the low-hanging fruit. This CO2 that finally comes off the top of our stack down the road can certainly be captured. And so there is an opportunity to get a double benefit impact. The way that we look at what we do at Questor is getting rid of the methane and looking for energy efficiency buys us time on this planet for some of these other technologies to take hold and become proven. The bottom line is we could probably get 80% of the way we are trying to get in terms of arresting the temperature rise by doing some simple things, which is make sure we don't put 1 molecule of methane into the atmosphere anymore. Finally, the side benefit to all of this is it creates a great opportunity for us to create a win with communities. Communities are concerned about their health. They don't like living next to flares and pollutants. They know that that has an impact on their health. So our technology not only can help from an environmental point of view, but we can help support the S in the ESG commitments that everyone is making. On that note, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. And I'm proud to say that Questor has been providing great solutions for over 25 years globally. And I hope to continue to help support the planet's goal to reduce emissions and deal with one of the biggest crises that we have, which is climate change. Thank you.